All right, we're live. Let's try this again. Okay, we're back. I'm back. I think we've got things working now. We no longer have Carson. Carson's no longer with us. That's not true. Carson is with us. He just had to go and do his actual job, his real job. So apologies for the audio issues earlier. I know that a lot of you don't know what I'm talking about because you were not with us earlier. But anyway, we're doing a post-game show. We're talking about Oklahoma State and South Alabama. I've got Kyle Boone with me on the other line. Let's make sure the audio is working now. I believe it is. But Kyle, how are you doing? Have you recovered from staying up most of the night last night?
Testing. Yeah, I am. I'm still recovering. In fact, you sent me a text just a little bit ago asking if I was willing to jump on the pod, and it was like okay, yeah, I'll do it. But let me get out of bed real fast. I need a quick coffee, and so yeah, it was good. It was a long night. Those 7 o'clock kicks are kicking my butt, but I'm looking forward to a 2:30 kick next week, and hopefully a better game next week too.
Yeah, if you're on here, Brad Ross gives us a thumbs up that he can hear us.
Word.
So that's good. If anybody else is on here, let us know if you can hear us because we had the audio screwed up earlier. Ben says he can clearly hear Kyle Boone. Can you clearly hear Kyle Porter? Hopefully,
That is the question.
Yeah, hopefully that's. I'm using all the tools that I have to get this going. Yeah. Okay. So everybody said we're good this time. I apologize for earlier. Audio issues were my fault. Carson had everything going well. I did not. But we'll have Carson on again after Boise. Again, if you're just joining us, he had to go into do his actual job, his real job, and be on the news, be on actual TV instead of some janky Facebook Live thing that I'm putting together. Kyle Boone is on the other line. He was at the game last night. He has been doing a great job, obviously for many years, writing for PFB, and has been in the press box for the last 2 years. So I don't know, Kyle. What's the number one thing that stood out just being there in person? I think one of the things I wrote in my just sort of notes recap on Saturday or on Sunday is that sometimes it's really hard to break this stuff down and to do analysis and all these different things because we're only seeing what TV shows us, what the cameras on TV show us. And I think you can definitely pick up more things when you're either a fan at the game, you're in the press box, you're on the field, whatever it is you're doing. So was there anything that stood out for you being at the game, being in the press box, being in the interview room afterwards that maybe people didn't pick up on TV?
Two things I would say probably to that. First, I was kind of critical of Taylor Cornelius, I guess, last night. He started really well, and in your 10 thoughts, you wrote that he should have been pulled at halftime. Otherwise, his stat line and just his general vibe would have been a lot better going into Boise State. He had two not so great passes that turned into interceptions, and one was in the end zone. But I thought that was kind of notable. Mike Gundy talked about just how impressed he was with Cornelius after the game. Said he looked a lot more comfortable in the pocket, which was a concern last week. He looked kind of antsy. Looked a lot more like himself this week, I guess, is a good takeaway. And so I think that's something that stood out to me. That just overall, I think Cornelius, OSU starting quarterback, played up to kind of his potential. He was 25 of 40, had over 400 yards passing. So all that is good. I think he has more confidence going into Boise State than if they went from Missouri State straight to Boise State last week, because he kind of had a rough debut last week. So that stood out to me. And then just the fact that OSU's special teams was really, really bad last night.
Yeah.
Was probably the second most notable takeaway because, OSU doesn't have its starting punter right now. Zach Seiner could be back next week. Mike Gundy said last night that he kicked this week and he's trying to make his way back from a hernia surgery. So I would expect he probably returns next week and gets his starting job back from Matt Hockett. But Hockett had kind of a fumble last night that turned the ball over and gave South Alabama really good field position. There were some penalties on special teams, and Gundy, I think, was most displeased with punt return. Just Dylan Stoner. I don't know if Dylan Stoner did anything wrong necessarily, but some of the punts that he let fly rather than fielding them, I think was peeving to Mike Gundy. I think he would have liked to see him field some of those and just take a fair catch or even try to return them. So I think there's some things to work out there on the special teams that a lot of OSU fans probably hoped would be worked out before the season, just because OSU special teams was so bad. So that's probably the two most notable things to me that stood out. And maybe we learned, maybe we didn't, but I think we'll know a lot more next week because Boise State is really good.
So you are. Let me positionally. Let me make sure I hear what you're saying. It seemed like last night you were wavering on Cornelius. Are you? Where do you stand as of today? Because I feel like this is a day-to-day thing for everybody. It seems like one day, Drew. I heard a rumor that Drew Brown had a great practice. So okay, so should he be the starter? Just where do you stand on wanting to see different guys or wanting Cornelius to be the guy?
Well, I think that I think Gundy has given him an unusually long leash. If you look back to Clint Shelf, when it was him and J.W. Walsh kind of vying for that starting job, I want to say it was like in 2013 or maybe 2012. Shelf, I think, threw an interception in the end zone that was just a really boneheaded decision and immediately got the hook. J.W. Walsh came in, and Walsh kind of took over. For the second week in a row last night, Cornelius threw a interception in the red zone. It's the ultimate quarterback sin, and yet we've only seen Taylor Cornelius, OSU starting quarterback, and Keandre Woodtee, OSU's fourth stringer. So I just think that I'd like to see Drew Brown just see what he can do. I mean, I think we've seen what he can do at Hawaii. But going into Boise State, a game that, OSU might be an underdog in that game, I would have liked to seen Drew Brown get some sort of run because Cornelius is going to be facing a lot more talented team in Boise State. And if he makes a boneheaded decision, kind of like he did for 2 weeks in a row now, you kind of want to know what you have in Drew Brown. So throwing him into the fire if need be next week, it could be like a little bit panicky, scary if you're an OSU fan. So I think they're going to just ride with Cornelius and hope that he's learned from those mistakes. And Yurcich said he won't do it again last night. He was pretty confident of that. So I don't know. I mean, I think I'm not all the way out on Cornelius, but at the same time, I'm not real impressed with him either. So what do you think about him?
First of all, I think Gundy just plays the quarterback he wants to play and uses whatever evidence there is. Because here's the thing. Like we talk about these things, starting quarterbacks and types of defenses as if they're incredibly black and white, and they're just not. Like there's evidence on both sides for pretty much anything in life, much less sports and teams within sporting events.
Yeah.
Sporting teams. Wow, that's embarrassing.
Tongue twister.
And so I think he just uses whatever evidence is available to support the position that he has already taken. And I think you've seen that with Cornelius. I'm kind of in on him. I mean, yes, I wish he would have been taken out at halftime because my position would be a lot stronger today than it is after he wasn't taken out at halftime and threw 2 picks in the second half. I thought he looked really sharp on the first couple drives. And I said this to Carson. He makes these intermediate and short throws with, I think, maybe better touch than Rudolph. Does that mean he's as good of a quarterback? Absolutely not. I don't think anybody who's lives in reality would say that. But I do think that there are things that he does better than Rudolph did. He had one run last night where he had a stiff arm and took off for 32 or 33 yards. That was really impressive. I don't know. So Rudolph was a really good decision maker. He didn't throw very many picks, especially early in his career. And he was really elusive in the pocket. Cornelius has a tendency to kind of just take off, whereas Rudolph could avoid the rush and still make the throw that he needed to make. So obviously I think Rudolph was more polished, just a better overall player. But again, what did people expect from Cornelius? Did they expect him to be better than Rudolph, or 95% as good as Rudolph? Did they expect him to be Brandon Whedon, who was a first-round pick? Rudolph was a third-round pick. I don't know. I feel like we're at a point where are Spencer Sanders and Drew Brown going to be that much better than Taylor Cornelius? I don't know. And even if they are, does Gundy trust them? I don't think he does. And so none of what we say matters because Gundy's going to do whatever he's going to do. But I feel kind of in on Cornelius. I think I wrote this before the game. I think the bigger the game, the more competition there is, the better for him because he's not thinking about all these other things. Not having started for 5 years, being a former walk-on, starting his first game, his parents being there, all the junk that goes with playing Missouri State in the opener. You don't think about that when it's you and Boise on this kind of big stage, 2 ranked teams. So I don't know. I'm kind of in on Cornelius. I wasn't to start the season. I wasn't to start the calendar year. I thought it was going to be Sanders. I still think Sanders is going to be great. But I'm kind of fine with Cornelius. I kind of feel about him the way I did about – I think Clint Shelf will turn out to be a better quarterback at OSU than Cornelius, but I sort of feel like him the way I did about Shelf.
I do wonder if some of the angst surrounding Cornelius and some of the buzz that the OSU fans want to see, Drew Brown or Spencer Sanders is just – more a reflection of just how fans feel about Drew Brown or Spencer Sanders compared to Cornelius. I mean, I don't think Cornelius has done terrible, and I mean, I guess if you're being totally honest, he's replacing an NFL quarterback, so it's not like he's just going to be a plug and play. No one expected him to be. He hasn't been a starter since a high school senior, so it's been 5 years for him, but Drew Brown had a lot of hype coming in. Spencer Sanders had a lot more hype coming in. And so now when you see what Cornelius is doing, which is sometimes he locks on to his first option. Sometimes he makes really dumb decisions in the red zone. He does do well in intermediate passes, whereas Rudolph kind of struggled. But downfield throwing hasn't been his strength so far.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of generally know what to expect from Spencer Sanders and Drew Brown in both those areas, but we don't know. So I don't know if that's more just we always hope for, or we have more hope and are more excited for what is the unknown, I guess. And we kind of feel like through 2 games, Cornelius and his value to OSU is kind of already a known commodity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, he just, what we've seen over the first 2 games is going to be sort of who he is. And I agree, I do think there's excitement because I think that there's a sense of okay, let's say you play Spencer. Let's say Spencer Sanders starts against Boise. That's obviously not going to happen. I'm just living in fantasy world. And he comes out and looks as good or 95% as good as Cornelius. Well, there's more excitement there because all of a sudden he's got a much higher ceiling. He has so much more room to grow. Cornelius is 23 years old. This is just who he is. He's not going to really change that much over the course of the year. But again, I've said this since the beginning of the season. I think Gundy thinks that the rest of his team is good enough that it doesn't really matter. I think that he thinks at the skill positions and even on defense that they're good enough to compete for second in the Big 12 or whatever, get to the Big 12 title game, and that's your season. And that may or may not be true, but I think that's probably what he believes. I did want to ask you, who excites you? Who makes you want to stand up in the press box more, Tylen or Tyron?
For sure, Tyron. Every time he touches the ball, it's just it takes your breath away. I mean, he does things. It's he caught the ball last night, and there was a guy just pummeling right at him, and he just does this little juke jive and jumps to the side and goes for like 60 yards, and I'm like, oh, like I know I'm probably making a scene in the press box, but he's just unreal. I mean, Tylen had a really good game too, and I don't want to overshadow just how good he was last night. But just the, I guess, elusiveness and the 5-star ability of Tyron, I think, is probably the most impressive to me. Every time he touches the ball, I feel like something big is going to happen.
Yeah, that's fair. I love Tylen. I think he's going to be awesome.
I think, is he wide receiver 1? Like, did we learn that last night?
He had 15 targets.
Can we go there? Is that too far?
No, I don't think it is, because you come into the season and it's like, okay, there's none of the 4 guys really pops as wide receiver 1, and I think the first 4 or 5 games, I don't know, that person might not even emerge over the course of the year, but I'd have to say right now that he is. And I don't think he's as talented as Tyron. I don't know if he's as I don't know. I don't know if he's as fast as maybe Stoner or Jalen, but I just think his consistency combined with his athleticism. Gundy keeps comparing him to Josh Stewart. He made a couple catches last night that I don't know if Josh Stewart ever made those types of catches. I mean, he's freakish athletic, and they go to him when they're throwing a fade in the end zone. They go to him all over the field, and he's phenomenal. I don't know if he's going to get to that tier that, James Washington and Rashawn Woods and Justin Blackmon were on, but I think that what we've seen, even his freshman year and more so the first 2 games this year, I think he can get to the tier just under it. That includes, I don't know, maybe an Aitman, a Josh Stewart, a Josh Cooper, guys like that are just phenomenal college wide receivers.
Yeah, he's not a big receiver. He's basically my height. He's like 6 foot. But him going up to high point some of those catches last night, they threw a fade to him in the end zone.
Yeah.
And he just ripped it out of the defender's hands. Like it wasn't like I don't think it was an elite fade pass, but
it was good.
But it was good, and he just grabbed it. He took it, and there was another one downfield that was kind of similar, and we saw that several years with Mason Rudolph and James Washington, where it's like, I don't think that was necessarily a good pass, but all right, that was a great play because James Washington just snatched it out of the air. Tylen definitely has that ability to just go, and those 50-50 balls are like 80-20 balls or like 90-10 balls because you just know Tylen's going to come down with it. So that's a good feeling, and he's already proven that he's pretty reliable. Just the fact that you throw it in his general direction, he's going to catch it. And he has what he says is 4.3 speed, so that's promising too.
He says that, or other people say that?
That's what he says.
Yeah, that might be 4.3 high school speed.
Yeah, maybe.
4.3 is burning. 4.3 is like the Hubbard telescope, as I dubbed him on Saturday night.
I like that.
Yeah, well, people keep saying Hubbard in space, and I was like, Hubbard in space, and then there we go.
Hubbard telescope.
Are you more concerned about I got like 2 or 3 more for you. Are you more concerned about the offensive line or the special teams?
The special teams. I think that would probably be Gundy's answer too. The offensive line wasn't great last night. So they had, let me look, they had 164 yards rushing last night. Midway through the second half, it was like 38 yards rushing on like 25 carries. It was not good. South Alabama was trying to game plan for that. They wanted to load the box. They wanted to bring extra defenders into the run game and just dare Taylor Cornelius to throw it, and he did. He had 428 yards rushing or yards passing, but I think Gundy's concern was there's going to be times when teams are going to scheme against you in the run game, and you have to be able to get those tough yards, and they could not do that last night. They were just running into walls. Justice Hill had 9 carries for 32 yards. Chuba Hubbard, 6 carries, 46 yards. He was the leading rusher last night. So a week after an historic OSU rushing day against Missouri State. It was a reality check for OSU because their offensive line could not clear any space last night. So I think the special teams will come. I think I have optimism that it will improve. I don't think it can really get much worse. But the offensive line, I think, was pretty concerning too.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm sort of the opposite in that the offensive line. I mean, you look back at last year's South Alabama game, and Oklahoma State had pretty much the same numbers in terms of yards. They're a little better yards per carry. Some of that might have had to do with the sacks that your punter getting sacked for minus 18 yards or whatever. That doesn't help.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Nobody worried about the run game last year, and it was the same type deal against South Alabama. I think that's just sort of how South Alabama plays teams like Oklahoma State. I don't know. That's not to say I'm not concerned at all. I do think you should be progressing and getting better instead of worse against some of these teams, and it seems like they were a little bit worse this year against South Alabama, that's not super encouraging. I think the bigger concern is that and I'd like to see what somebody like Dustin or Thomas, who write for our site, think about this. What happens when, like they did last year, Texas plays you like that? Because then all of a sudden they've got the athletes to cover your receivers, and if they can take that away with James Washington and Mason Rudolph on offense, what are they going to do with Taylor Cornelius and Tylan Wallace? We just talked about Tylan, but those guys aren't Rudolph and Washington. That's concerning because if you can't run with your four guys against Texas or against, I don't know, Iowa State or whoever, and they make Cornelius and Tylan and Tyron beat you, I don't know. I don't know if I feel great about that. Special teams, man, that's disappointing. It really is disappointing to me that this was a staple of Gundy teams for the first 10 years he was there. They were disciplined. They were great on special teams. They did little things well. And for the last few years, we haven't seen it. Why are you hiring a second defensive line coach and not a special teams coach? I just think...
Especially after seeing OU hire a special teams coach and they just score punt return touchdowns every week now.
Yeah. And Gundy, you were in there, but Gundy said it's not about schemes, it's about discipline. Well, yeah, of course it is, but is that going to get better as the season wears on? Do you get more and more disciplined? I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know.
It doesn't really seem like that. That's pretty disappointing because I think that's going to lose them a game. I don't know if it's going to be this year, bowl game, next year. At some point, that's going to really cost them, and that's just something that, as a team on the margins with talent in terms of upper tier, like Oklahoma State is, you can't afford to be undisciplined and to be bad at special teams.
Yeah, and that's been a staple with Mike Gundy teams, or at least for the past 3 years, we keep saying special teams and discipline players is a staple of Mike Gundy. And the past 3 years, special teams and lack of discipline has really hurt them. So they definitely have to shore things up before conference play, and unfortunately, they need to shore things up before Boise State. Otherwise, they might get beat next week against Boise because they're pretty good.
Yeah, they are good. Okay, last thing I got for you.
Yep.
Did Mike Gundy give you any of his smoothie on Saturday night?
No. Did he say he had vodka in his smoothie, or did he say he wish he had vodka in his smoothie?
He said something like it would be better with vodka or something like that. He
said it in real time, and I blacked out, and I was like, oh no, wow, I can't believe he said that. Everyone was laughing, and I don't know. I always wish I was there for the I'm a man, I'm 40 thing. And so if Gundy ever kind of goes off kilter and says something crazy, I black out, and I'm like, oh no, this is actually happening. But yeah, it was pretty funny. I didn't get a smoothie or vodka for that matter, but he was pretty loose last night in the post-game press conference. He's always entertaining.
Well, he couldn't stop. He was obsessed with that smoothie. He couldn't even answer questions. He was so into the smoothie. It was kind of incredible. It did lead to an all-time gif of him leaning against the podium and just slurping from. Hey, I would be too if I was Sixth in the country in winning percentage over the last 4 years. If you guys have questions, send them in. I know some people have already sent some in. Magruder being gone in the first half is going to kill the secondary next week. I don't think he's gone for the first half, is he?
No, he'll be back. He got ejected in the first half, so he'll be back next week. Not the same for Logan Carter though. Logan Carter, the Cowboy back, he'll miss the first half of next week.
I don't know how much.
Not a huge loss.
I was going to say I don't know how much sleep I'm going to lose over Logan Carter missing the first half of Boise. He did play a lot last night. He had multiple penalties, I think, which was not good.
He did. How about Jelani last night?
Jelani's a monster. Dustin tweeted out a video
6'7"
of him running down the field when Tyron picked up his 60-yard gain, and that's somebody I don't want to get in front of. He
moves like a train.
He's crazy.
He's so big.
I guess I didn't envision him being. I should have, I guess, because he was a quarterback, but I didn't envision him being that athletic or that fast.
I didn't think he could move that quick. That really surprised me.
Yeah. So this guy's saying that Magruder will be out for the first half against Boise, and we don't know the rules. Is that true? I don't think it is.
He'll be back. He will not miss any more time because if he was ejected in the second half, he'd be forced to miss the first half of Boise. He was ejected in the first half of South Alabama.
Yeah.
So he missed the second half of South Alabama, and he'll be back for the first half of Boise. Yeah.
Right. Get your facts straight.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, you had your facts straight.
Oh, okay.
Okay, what else? Anything else we need to cover? Uniforms were good. Don't love the helmets.
Oh, you don't like the barbed wire?
No, please.
I thought it was great.
Yeah,
I like the gray too.
You're a millennial. I like the gray.
Yeah, the gray was good. I think that was kind of too elite a uniform combo for South Alabama.
Well, it's also like. Don't wear the Central Michigan combo again, like in week 2 against a non-Power 5 opponent.
Yeah,
not a good vibe there.
They're trying to exercise all the demons of uniform past.
Yeah, they did it with for Bedlam in Norman with the black, white, orange. That's what they wore at Iowa State in 11.
Yeah,
and then they won Bedlam with it in when was that? 14.
14.
Yeah.
The last time they won Bedlam.
Mrs. Pistol's 10 Thoughts, what'd you think?
I actually haven't read it yet. It got a lot of good reviews. There was a lot of people begging for it to be a weekly mainstay on the website, so I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, we might. I don't know if we can afford her, but we might need to hire her. It was funny true. Because we were watching the game. And I said. You should do this every week. It would kill traffic, page views. Yeah. Let's go. And she was like, well, the problem is my 10 thoughts is really just for the whole season, and I just apply them all to 1 week. So she was like, if I watched again next week, it would 9 out of the 10 would be the same. So that would be a problem.
That's fine. We could just copy and paste it and then change South Alabama to Boise State and then update the stats and boom, content.
Yeah. Okay, last one. Lyndon Williams asked, is Drew Brown going to play? People, by the way, this is nothing against Lyndon. People on that work at PFB and people in the media, everybody's obsessed with Drew Brown. Drew Brown might not be great. He might be, but I just feel like we're treating him as why aren't people talking about Spencer Sanders? Why Drew Brown over Spencer Sanders? Spencer Sanders is going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, I think people just come to the conclusion he's not playing. Gundy is hard set on redshirting him, right? Yeah. Whereas Drew Brown is a 5th-year guy. You kind of know he's got a lot of experience, and he's gotten some rave reviews in camp, but he's just not quite up to speed yet. Is kind of the vibe I get from everyone.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's fair. But Lyndon asked if Drew Brown would play next week.
Shoot, I don't know.
Yes or no?
I'm gonna say no. Yeah, I think if he does play next week, OSU loses big. like like OSU gets down by 20 and they're like, "All right, well we'll just see what you can do." You know. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that Drew Brown does not play next week. I think Cornelius plays. He plays, like, again, it's people just expect the next guy, whoever it is, to step in and be Rudolph-like. And it's like,
Yeah.
even if you're 80% or 85% of Rudolph, you can still be a really good team.
Yeah.
I mean, Rudolph won 30, how many games did he win? 33, 32, something like that? I mean, he's like an all-time great college quarterback for in the Big 12.
Yeah.
And I think that Cornelius will play the whole game and play fine, and it'll be a close game, and Oklahoma State might win because they're at home, and then you move on to Kansas or Iowa State or whoever's next.
So do you think we'll see will we see any non-Taylor Cornelius quarterbacks besides Keandre the rest of the season? Spencer Sanders or Drew Brown?
Yeah, I think we'll see Drew Brown because I think injury will come into play. It often does. It almost always has when Gundy's
even with Rudolph, it has.
Yeah.
In the past.
Yeah. I mean,
and he was pretty durable.
Was it the 15 Bedlam game when he had the
broken foot?
Yeah.
Yep.
So it just happens. I think we'll see Drew Brown at some point this season. I just don't think it'll be against Boise State.
Yep, I agree with that.
Okay. Oh, so, Brian Metcalf wants to know if you missed the discussion about the second coming of Brandon Pettigrew in Jelani Woods. That's a great question.
You did.
That's great. Okay, that's all I got. Kyle, thanks for doing this on short notice. Apologies again for the audio issues earlier, but we will put this up. If you're just catching the end of it, we'll put it up on the site. We'll upload it to YouTube or just post the Facebook video. So appreciate everybody tuning in. We're going to try to do this, if not the night of, then the day after all of Oklahoma State's games this year. So keep reading, watching, listening, sharing with your friends. We appreciate it, and we'll talk soon, Kyle.
Okay, see ya.
See ya.